Square Circle Co.
In the year 2000, a new gaming company was formed in Sydney, Australia named Square Circle Co. Like so many other small gaming companies around this time, they wanted to make desktop in-browser games. For so many people who couldn't afford to buy a new video game for their console every week, these desktop in-browser games were their best source for entertainment. It's difficult to truly know the exact number of people who played these games, but there are rough comparisons. According to the 2000 census for the United States, 44 million households had access to the internet, or about 42% of homes in the US. For comparison, later in 2006, according to gameplay metrics, 41% of homes had a video game console. While there is likely overlap for these groups, it does mean that it would appear around half the country, if not more, didn't have access to at least one of these options for gaming. For some families, at least a computer with internet access could also help for things like work at home, compared to earlier video game consoles which rarely had any use outside of just video games at the time. Furthermore, unlike video games, these browser games, while a much lower quality than their console counterparts, were free. So it's easy to infer that millions of people looking for hundreds of games to choose from relied on these internet browser games to fulfill that need. While Square Circle Co. would make at least a dozen of these games, one set of games would become one of the most popular internet browser games of its day, the Heli Attack series. Easily one of the most popular genres of browser games, just like with any other video game, was the shooter. Aside from the arcade nature of the shooter, which allows for casual low-stakes fun, it's no secret that cool-looking guy with cool-looking weapon shooting cool-looking enemies was seen as, well, pretty cool. For the Heli Attack series, you played a guy who shot enemies in the air, mostly helicopters, hence the name. The franchise would create 3 games, and while it would start pretty bare bones and basic, each game would become more popular and more impressive than the last. In 2000, Heli Attack, or rather, Heli Attack, was released. The graphics were raster enough to look like someone made it in MS Paint, which, hey, I'll certainly never complain about that. But believe it or not, these graphics were actually pretty standard for browser games at the time, and much easier for Flash players with early spotty internet connection to load. Playing this 24 years later, there are definitely many things missing from later games that you'd almost take for granted now. There's no sound in the game, no health bar for either you or your enemies, you just have a health number counter that goes from 100 to 0. You shoot circular bullets and nothing indicates you've even hit your enemy or that they've hit you other than your health number going down. But you fire enough shots, the helicopter blows up and the next one comes in. This is certainly not an appealing game by today's standards, and at the time it was even considered a minigame rather than a full browser game. That said, there were still some cooler unique things from this game. Firstly, if you shot down enough enemy helicopters, you had a chance to either be given a shotgun that could fire a bullet spread or a flamethrower, which is always cool. Then secondly, slow-ish circular bullets moving in random directions can add a unique fun of trying to gymnastically avoid them rather than just simply ducking. But with this early minigame, it didn't really go anywhere, and it obviously needed a lot of improvement. Luckily, the developers did a good job improving this for the next game in the franchise. In 2003, Heli Attack 2 was released and was a huge upgrade. Firstly, there was sound and music. You could hear an overly compressed gunfire sound effect, an overly compressed impact sound effect, and a hurt sound effect that sounded like someone getting a hairball. Secondly, the graphics are much more detailed while still possessing the charm of pixelated graphics. There is also finally a health bar, at least for you, and a more varied side-scrolling landscape for you to run along as you shoot your enemy helicopters in the sky. Also, this time you actually know when you're damaging the enemy because, aside from the sound effect, the helicopter will briefly flash when hit. You can also see a reload bar, which for most weapons doesn't really matter, but for some it does. 2 new features for this game are the hyper jump and the time distort. The hyper jump is basically a quick, super high jump you can make that has its own stamina bar before you can reuse it. Meanwhile, the time distort is basically slow motion, where everything slows down and drags. Technically, since this also slows down the speed of the bullets both you and your enemy fire, it doesn't necessarily aid your gameplay. Essentially, these 2 features have the purpose of just making a cool situation look even more badass. To make the over-the-top action aesthetic even better, not only do the helicopters explode when you destroy them, but when you die in the game, you explode, often taking the helicopter that killed you with you. I guess your body weirdly petrifies or something? Makes no sense, but it looks cool. Naturally, such a cool action game needs cool weapons, and aside from the usual pistol, there are a bunch of new weapons with varying levels of damage that you have random chances of receiving for every 2 helicopters you destroy. There's the flamethrower and shotgun from the original game. Then there are fire mines, which are basically grenades. 2 rapid-fire weapons in the form of a machine gun and akimbo MAC-10s, which are like 2 single handheld submachine guns. Then you have a rocket launcher, a seeker launcher, which is a rocket launcher that auto-locks onto the helicopter, and a shotgun rocket launcher that fires 3 rockets at once. Then of course we can't forget the grenade launcher and RPG weapons, the railgun, which is kind of like a giant laser beam, a grapple cannon, a shoulder cannon, and then of course the coolest weapon of them all, an atomic bomb launcher. Yeah, a handheld weapon that launches a mini atomic bomb. Now, you might be thinking, wouldn't half of these weapons be overkill for a helicopter, and wouldn't some of these kill you along with it? Yes, in real life, but in the game? No. It's all there just to be awesome and cool looking. And ultimately, that was the appeal of Heli Attack 2. Taking a normal video game concept in a lower quality format of video gaming, but making it as cool looking as possible. The game ended up being primarily platformed on the new online game website Miniclip to tremendous success, being declared the Miniclip Game of the Year in 2003. FlashKit, a major forum and community for Shockwave and Flash games, awarded Heli Attack 2 as the most addictive game of 2003. In 2004, when Miniclip's homepage began to include lists for the daily most popular games on the website, Heli Attack 2 was still in the top 10 for half of that year, which was impressive for a website where dozens of new games premiered every month. With this success, there was pressure to make an even better game, and in 2005, they finally did. On June 17, 2005, Heli Attack 3 was released, and just like the previous one, it was an exponential improvement. One common aspect of browser games was the charming simplicity, but there are still features from more standard video games that browser games at the time didn't always have. They were ultimately browser games, not console games, not PC games. But Heli Attack 3 broke ground by bridging those differences and bringing the quality of Flash browser games to new levels not previously seen. The music, firstly, has been upgraded, with multiple tracks all made by an Australian DJ by the artist name of Psychopig, and the theme from the menu is still one of my favorite game tracks of all time, despite the lower quality audio that was common for Flash at the time. Although honestly for me, early internet quality audio is on that same level as like vinyl crackle or radio static as being charmingly vintage, but I'm definitely biased in that regard. The graphics also have an improvement, including a cool feature of your soldier character becoming more bloody and skeleton-like the lower his health bar is. As quaint as it sounds, that simple small amount of pixelated blood was enough to be considered somewhat edgy for a 2000s browser game. Violence in video games, especially with any amount of gore, has always been fearmongered among parents in the media, and I even remember someone at my school whose parents told him he wasn't allowed to play this game because of that. So naturally he just played it in computer lab time at school. This was a level of graphics considered very impressive for a game of this type at the time. Not many people were putting that much effort into their browser games. If we're being honest, this level of graphics looks better than many Game Boy games of the time. But what brought the game to the next level was, well, levels. The first 2 Heli Attacks were arcade shooters. You shoot until you die, it just went on forever. This one had 16 levels of gameplay, including a tutorial training zone. If you still wanted to play an arcade shoot until you die type of game, the final level in the game would be in that format. In 2005, most browser games at that time that had levels were mainly puzzle games or remakes of classic arcade games. Having multiple side-scrolling levels across multiple settings including tundra, jungle, desert, and industrial warehouse at that time was kind of rare. The impressiveness of the game wasn't that it was supposedly better than the top video games of the time, but rather that it could be on equal footing with many video games, despite being a free-to-play small studio Flash game that is literally limited to 600 by 800 pixels. It'd be like if you went to McDonald's and you were able to get a top-of-the-line quality steak for $1. By the 2010s, many other browser games would have many of these features and some even better ones, but I believe Heli Attack 3 was one of the games that proved itself and moved that bar forward. If someone re-released Heli Attack 3 today on Steam as like a cheap indie game, as long as they added more levels, I think it would still hold up for many people. In the game itself, there are now a variety of enemies, including 4 different sizes of hostile aircraft of varying health size that also had different levels of maneuverability. The medium helicopter can also drop aerial bombs, while the large helicopters occasionally barrage you with rocket missiles. There are also 3 types of mini-robots along the ground you run into as you move from one side of the map to the other, 2 of which are able to fire at you as well. The hyper jump and time distort abilities are still there, and of course with each level the difficulty of enemies as well as the number of enemies you need to destroy to advance increases. If you thought Heli Attack 2 had weapons leveling on ridiculous, then Heli Attack 3 takes that further. Heli Attack 2 had 15 weapons, Heli Attack 3 had 32. You start off with your pistol, a knife, and 25 grenades. Before you ask, yes, you can stab a helicopter to death if you've got the patience to jump and stab it a dozen times. The weapons you earn by killing enemies or completing levels include machine gun, chain gun, akimbo Mac-10s, shotgun, grenade launcher, RPG, rocket launcher, seeker launcher, shotgun rockets, flamethrower, railgun, flak cannon, and a taser. Yes, a taser. But there's another set of weapons both real and ridiculous that can be unlocked with cheat codes. Yeah, you heard me, cheat codes in a browser flash game. I won't reveal all the cheat codes here to unlock these weapons. That's because there's a cheat code to just unlock all the weapons at once. Saves you time. Skip ahead a little bit if you don't want to hear the cheat code, but I really don't think it matters at this point. Basically, imagine the Konami code, except instead of the order of the buttons that you press on a controller, you just physically type out the Konami code. There you go. That being said, here are the weapons you can unlock with cheat codes. Bow and arrows, double shotgun, sniper rifle, drunken launcher, guided launcher, a goo gun, a bladerang, which, imagine a gun that shoots a blade that always comes back like a boomerang. A laser, an automatic laser, shotgun lasers. The Anytime, which is a more powerful railgun. A soundwave gun, the atomic bomb launcher, a button to call in an airstrike, and then the ultimate weapon, a black hole generator. Yes, it literally fires a blast that makes a mini black hole that, if timed right, can suck in 2 to 3 helicopters in a row with its single blast. Now obviously, some of these weapons you'll receive more often than others, even with cheat codes. They just add them to the dice roll of possible weapons and the ratio is not even. But that just makes it that much cooler when you do get lucky and receive one of the cooler ones. One other cool thing about the weapons though that I've literally never seen in another game is that wasting good weapons on tiny enemies gets you more points. Remember how I mentioned that there were many ground enemies? Normally it takes 1 to 3 pistol shots to kill them, so they're hardly worth using a good weapon on. But if I decide to go overkill and say waste a rocket launcher shot on them, I actually get more points for that overkill. I don't know why, but I've always found that detail really neat. When Heli Attack 3 was released, I remember how quickly everyone in my school was talking about it and raving the game. It quickly went to the #1 spot on the Miniclip Top 10 and stayed there for 2 months non-stop. What was the previous game that was on top? Oh, just a little game called RuneScape. Yes, there was actually a time where Heli Attack 3 was more popular than RuneScape. Unfortunately, Miniclip never had publicly available analytics for each game, so I don't know the exact number of plays this game had, but based on this Google Analytics graph of monthly site traffic in the form of unique visitors to Miniclip, in 2005 there were around 22 to 25 million visitors a month for the latter half of 2005 when Heli Attack 3 came out. That means there were likely days where hundreds of thousands of people were playing it at minimum, which when compared to current day Steam charts would actually still be a pretty high number. Of course, this is all an estimation. But hey, if anyone who used to work at Miniclip or still works at Miniclip somehow has that information, I'd love to hear it. Hey, so quick mid-edit interjection here. So I was looking at the Square Circle Co. website through the Internet Archive, and it was able to load the weird player that it had back in the day. And when I opened up its page for Heli Attack 3, it said that it had over 120 million plays, and this was at the end of 2005. So 120 million plays within half a year. So that's about as close to an actual number as I'm probably going to find. But still very impressive, especially for its time. Sadly though, despite Heli Attack 3's success, Square Circle Co. was never able to top it. They made a few other games, but they were all very basic and didn't have the level of detail that Heli Attack 3 had. The browser game market got extremely competitive and oversaturated the more time went on. The lack of another success caused the company to go defunct in 2009. Their website still seems to exist, but it just shows this weird single image of smoke and nothing else. Originally, there was this idea growing up that the internet is forever. It can't wither away like a physical object. But as PC games became more mainstream, and other players such as Java or HTML5 replaced Flash for many built-in browser games on websites, Flash games became less important. The advent of mobile games on your phone was another crippling blow. Then of course, Adobe Flash got discontinued altogether at the end of 2020, making any Flash game unplayable if your device didn't have its own Flash player already downloaded onto it, which didn't matter because the games would only be playable in the browser. So if the website was also gone, then you were screwed. The thought of thousands of games, including Heli Attack 3, that provided so much entertainment for an entire generation of kids growing up just disappearing or becoming unplayable is kind of heartbreaking. Even now, Miniclip has abandoned most of its old games for just its few most popular ones like Agario and apparently Pool. Luckily, other people have cared, and Heli Attack 3, along with many other Flash and Shockwave browser games, have been preserved on the Internet Archive, or with downloadable archives such as the Flashpoint project. So at least now I can play Heli Attack 3 on my PC whenever I'm feeling nostalgic. But I also wanted to make this video to start a series discussing and remembering these lost and nearly forgotten games. So I hope you liked this video and that you'd be interested in watching more in the future. Thanks for watching.